session with everyone too.
Awesome. Abby, I have to say before we even dive in, I'm laughing because you all are getting access to the only professional photo that I could get my hands on of recent, where I unintentionally wore a shirt that looks like a pajama top. So enjoy that on your Friday afternoon.
I love it.
But like Abby shared, my name's Kristin Economos. I am the Director of Student Leadership Programs at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm coming to you live from my home in downtown Des Moines. So I'm really glad to be here today. I feel a little bit like every minute that we are online at this point in the semester feels like a gift that anyone's willing to give. So thanks for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to diving into this topic and hopefully having it be something that feels both cozy and casual, because I think that's what we need at the end of a busy semester.
Cozy and casual feels nice.
Yeah, why not?
Very good. Thanks for that. All right. I do want to start us off by just sharing some polling questions. So I'll pop up some polls in front of you, and I just want to kind of get a sense of who's with us and what's this semester been like for you. So the first poll question I'll ask if anyone from your department or division has been furloughed, and if you would just want to answer yes or no to that question. And then I'll share the results with you all as soon as at least most people have responded. We have 85 people have responded so far, 90 people. All right. So it looks like for 94% of you, no one has been furloughed in your department or division. So let's hope that continues. That's very good. As I share the second poll question with you, who typically attends your leadership program offerings? Is it students that are already in leadership roles on campus, students that are interested in leadership positions, or a good mix of both? %50 have responded so far, so I'll give that another couple seconds. Okay. All right, so that looks like a good mix of both is what we're seeing primarily, and then students who are already in those leadership roles on campus, so that's great to see. And then for our third and final poll question, I will share with you, how would you describe the participation of students from historically marginalized groups in your leadership programs? Are they very involved, somewhat involved, a little bit involved, or it depends on what's offered? I have to say, watching these poll numbers come in takes me back to election night. 75% of people have responded so far, 80%. Okay, I'll go ahead and end that poll then and share these results with you. So yeah, it looks like it depends on what the experience is that's being offered, just in thinking about those marginalized groups and what it is that they're most interested in. So thanks for responding to those poll questions. And moving on to a couple more elements about leadership that I would like to share with you all, just these 4 elements of equitable leadership. LeaderShape believes that leaders who seek to create equity engage in conversations about identity and equity with courage and curiosity. They understand the complex ways that systematic inequality operates. They recognize that social positionality informs their perspectives, reactions, and interactions. And they act strategically within their spheres of influence to create a more equitable environment. As we think more about leadership within this context, I wanted to share LeaderShape's definition of leadership, which is that leadership involves living in a state of possibility, making a commitment to a vision, developing relationships to move vision into action, and sustaining a high level of integrity. Effective leadership takes place in the context of a community and results in a more equitable society. So with that context of definition and equitable leadership, as LeaderShape defines it, I want to turn things over to our facilitator, Kristin Economos, and talking about how we reflect back on this super weird and unprecedented semester.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Abby. Well, hi, everybody. For any of you who just came in. My name's Kristin. I'm the Director of Student Leadership Programs on campus at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. We have a beautiful day here. I don't know what it's like there, but I'm really excited to be with you and to be joining you today. I know with several of these other presentations during some of these sessions the past few weeks that there's been a little bit of a caveat at the beginning of each one with the facilitator saying, I'm not the expert, let's talk together. And that's certainly the vibe that I'm looking for and the vision I have for today with all of you. So really, really excited to be here. I wanted to give you just a quick overview of where we're going in our roadmap for the next, I don't know, Abby, what, 48 minutes or so, to let you know my thoughts. And obviously we can be flexible if any of this resonates more than other pieces or not. I know we've all been through such an unusual semester and that many of us are still in the thick of submitting grades or procrastinating grading or working on curriculum and reports for all sorts of things that are due before we take a break at the end of the year. So if you would do me a favor, I know many of you are likely in a variety of different spaces right now, either with others or on your own. But if it's comfortable, I'd love to be able to start us off with just doing like a 1-minute mindfulness exercise, just to be able to be present and to practice what it means to be able to be in the now as we start to reflect back on the semester. So do me a favor if you would. I'm going to do this myself in my own bar stool seat in my kitchen, but go ahead and put your feet firmly on the ground if you're able. Your hands resting in your lap. And then I'd like you to just either cast a neutral gaze or close your eyes. And to feel the weight of your hands on your legs and the weight of your body in your chair. And do me a favor, take 1 deep breath in for 4 counts. Hold for a moment and exhale out. And I want you to breathe in 1 more time, getting as deep as you can to breathe in your belly. And to exhale out. And you can open your eyes. I don't know about you, but I feel like I've been going from meeting to meeting and Zoom call to Zoom call. And oftentimes, even in the midst of a semester where I know that being present is something that's important and something that I talk to students about all the time, I'm so quick to describe what to do and then not actively practice it myself. So selfishly, part of that's for me, but I hope part of that is for you too, to be able to jump in. What we'll go ahead and do today, I wanted to start off just by sharing a brief story to give you a little bit of perspective of where I'm coming from as I'm thinking about reflecting back on an unusual semester, and would love to hear more about where you're coming from with your own stories as well. We'll do a quick exercise that'll just be something tangible for you to be able to think back on the term and think about what some of the high and low points may have been. And then I'd love to go through a couple of discussion questions and then end with a few best practices that we can share with each other. I told Abby, one thing that I've been doing with my students this semester is this idea of what are some of our life hacks that we have around the pandemic? What kinds of structures are working well for us? What boundaries are we setting? What language are we using to describe some of those things? And even like what apps on our phones are helping us versus making it impossible to get off of the laptop screen by the time the day is over. So I'll leave some time at the end for us to discuss that as well. But as we get going, the first thing I wanted to share with you was just a little bit of a story. I started off this semester, like many of you, not knowing exactly how teaching would look and how leadership education would be working for my students. I oversee a leadership institute here at Drake that works with about 275 undergraduate students and has an entirely co-curricular opportunity for them to be able to gain leadership skills and training to apply to their roles on campus. And as I've done that this semester, one of the things I did the very first week of the semester was to have students think about how they were describing their term, how they were describing their experience this fall, and trying not to do it in the way that every other faculty member or every other facilitator was doing things. So one of the things I asked students to do was to share with me at the beginning and at the end of the semester their experience in life overall this fall in 6 words. And I know many of you are likely familiar with the idea of a 6-word story and how we can often share narratives in really short sentences. But I'm going to share with you in the chat just a couple of the stories that my students shared at the end of the term so that you know where we were here in Des Moines. The first, if I can get back to everybody here. This was the first one that was submitted during our last week of instruction last week. I have a student who said, I was on Zoom seemingly forever. That was how they described their semester. I had a student that said this. One breakout discussion changed my life. One student said this. I'm exhausted and it mostly sucked. And one student said this, we zoned out, but then we connected. And so I was thinking about this and wanted to obviously share one of my own with students at the beginning of the semester and at the end of the term. And I was thinking back to my entire semester, my personal life, my professional life this fall. And what I came up with was this: I began empty, but I ended full. And that means a lot of different things that I won't dive into based on time, but I wanted to give you just a quick kind of overview of where I came from this semester and what's on my mind as I'm thinking back to an unusual fall. So a little bit of background for you. I have been in my role here at Drake for just over about 2.5 years. And was able to move back to Des Moines in the spring of 2018 to be near my family. I had 2 parents who were both battling cancer diagnoses at the time. And my big fat Greek family and our upbringing was very, very closely tied into the value of close proximity as a way to be support to our extended family. So I've been able to spend some really great time with family while I've been back home, but was met with some really difficult circumstances. My dad lost his 3-year battle with pancreatic cancer and passed away fairly unexpectedly at the end. We had about 6 days notice from when we found out that he was ill and that he was not going to get better to when he died. And my dad passed away Sunday morning before the semester started this fall at Drake. And I remember feeling like, okay, we already have this really unusual semester. Everybody's already exhausted from decision fatigue and figuring out how to stay safe, how to be safe for the best interests of our community, and also how to have the kind of mental health that we know we need to maintain and build connection through. So truthfully, I started off this fall semester and just felt like I'm wiped. I'm taking 2 weeks off of work to be able to figure out how to grieve and celebrate the life of my father without being able to have a full funeral or be able to see a lot of the people that I would typically want to hug and console alongside me. And I remember feeling like, gosh, this may be a semester where it's just going to all have to be fairly mediocre. You know, I don't have a whole lot of time to be able to prep. I don't have a whole lot of time to think through new creative ideas for curriculum, or even thinking about the ways I want to use where I am to bring my gifts to students. I don't feel like I can do that fully. And so I really did start off the semester feeling like I was drawing from an empty barrel, and am shocked truly to feel like at the end of the semester, while it's still certainly heavy, and while even everything and everyone on campus I know is exhausted, that we've still managed to find moments of joy and to find true connection without having it be insincere or cheesy this semester. And that's been something that's been really powerful. So I tell you that just to let you know, I know many of you are likely in scenarios where you're dealing with multiple competing roles on your time, lack of strict boundaries for what constitutes as work and what constitutes for personal commitments. And so wherever you are with that, I just want you to know that I honor that and honor you, and I'm so grateful to have you here. What I'd love to do as we get started in thinking through this semester is an activity that I know many of us are likely already doing with students. But I want to spend about 5 minutes and just get us all on a similar note and a similar page to focus on now and reflect back on the semester. So what I'd ask you to do, if you are able to, if you have anything nearby, is to grab a scratch piece of paper and a pen. If you don't have that and you want to use your phone and use the notes app, that's totally fine by me. But I'm going to put on some background music, and I'm going to give us about 4 or 5 minutes max. And I just want you to draw a quick timeline. You can see my example here of August to December, and to put down what are some of the high points and low points, both personally and professionally, for you as you think back on this year. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off. I'll leave my mic on so you can hear background music. Feel free to mute it if it's distracting. And we'll come back together at 12:25 to go over a couple of questions. Okay, everybody, I'll give you about another 30 seconds or so to wrap up wherever you are. And as you finish up, before we dive into some questions, what I'd love to do is to continue with this theme of a 6-word story. I always think I have a friend of mine who is very gifted at speaking in really efficient language. And she often talks about the importance of saying something succinctly and being able to say something short to make it more memorable. And so I think the idea of a 6-word story is one that is a really powerful use of that, because while we can't fit everything into 6 words, oftentimes we can get to the spirit of how we felt through 6 words. So let's just start off, if you would. I want you to take a look or even think through what it was like as you started to list out some of the high points or low points of the semester. I want you to think about a 6-word story that would describe generally how fall 2020 was for you. This can be a bad first draft. It's not getting sent anywhere. I will not be documenting any of these, but I want you to think about how you would describe your timeline in a 6-word story. And if you would, go ahead and think through that for a few minutes and type that into the chat. Oh, Abby, I like that. Learned to love what I hated.
This mostly has to do with yard work, I have to say.
That's understandable.
I have never in my life spent so much time looking at my lawn and considering my lawn and thinking about what I should do with my lawn. And I love it now. I just love it.
Oh, that's huge.
Oh, that's a good one, Jen.
Oh,
I really like that. Mm, mm.
wow, I like that one too, Austin.
Yeah, that's really good. Ah, Dana, that reminds me of that quote about these mountains that you're carrying, you were only meant to climb, right? Like those ways in which we're carrying so much more than we think we need to, or carrying so much more than we actually have to. I appreciate that sentiment. Mm,
Grief with uncertainty. Yeah. Wow. Deshaun, I feel like I need to tattoo that on my forehead this semester. That's a great one.
yeah.
Reminded of what truly fuels me. Oh, that's good too.
Mm.
Gosh, all of you are doing a much better job. I can't tell you how many times I was crafting mine for my students and kept having to count on my fingers whether I was over the 6-word limit.
Sarah, that's really good too. What is worth your time? I feel like we've got the time now to consider what that is, right? That's really good.
I was telling my students this yesterday, but one of the things that I wish I would have implemented sooner that I'm hopeful to do in the future is to make myself do this activity with a 6-word story every single semester for my own professional development, to be able to think through, even just sort of the general spirit of how things went. I think it would be really powerful to have even a laundry list of these over time, to be able to see some of the ways in which you grew as a professional or as a facilitator that we may otherwise miss or may not document appropriately because it doesn't fit into some particular category on our resume.
Right. Mm.
Oh, these are good.
Oh, Jessica, that's really good. Facing challenge.
Wonderful. Well,
Erin,
thanks, everybody.
I like that too, Erin, because I think so often we shy away from those challenges, right? Because they seem so scary and overwhelming, but the growth that comes with that is so valuable.
Absolutely. Feel
Mhm.
free to continue. For any of you that are still wanting to add in, feel free to do so. We'll go ahead. Abby, if you're up for it, maybe we'll go over to the next slide. And there are a lot of questions here, so we certainly don't need to go through each of these, but depending on what resonates with you, I want you to take a look at that timeline. I'm just curious to hear from people. Maybe let's start with those first 2 questions, Abby, if we can, of which moment are you most proud of and which moment was most difficult this semester? And I can tell you, just to kick things off, as I was thinking through some of these myself, one of the moments that I was most proud of this semester was being able to see tangibly some of the relationships and the kinds of connections that we all have with one another as leadership educators across the country, and bringing that expertise and those voices in to meet with my students. And I think about so many times where I thought, oh, it'd be great to have this person, but I can't afford to bring them to campus. Or, oh my gosh, I have this great idea of something we could do together, but there are only 3 weeks left in the semester. And so I had a chance, in fact, some of you in this room even had a chance to work with a few people to be able to bring expertise and perspective that I know I don't have and can't bring into a space with my students that otherwise wouldn't have been possible had we not been virtual. So that's something I'm really proud of in terms of seeing the output of some of those connections. Katie Selby, I hope it's okay, I'm putting you on the spot here, but I had a moment in September where I was watching Katie do some of her incredible work with designing your life and that curriculum with my students. And I thought, I would have never guessed that when I was having an informational interview coffee happy hour with Katie in the fall of 2011, that she would be speaking to students for a job and an institution that I would have never known I'd be part of, 9 years later. So just to see some of those connections for me was a really exciting moment.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a moment that was particularly you were proud of or that was difficult? Yeah, Katie, you were great. My students are still talking about it.
I'll share one that happened more recently. One of my lowest moments of the semester was when, everything kind of came to a head, right? Every one of us has probably experienced a moment like that with stress. And I don't know why, but I was just having a week where everything was like on the surface. Like it doesn't take much. And I started crying, for no reason. And I had to teach, and my students have a group me for our class. And so I just told them like, hey, I'm just going to be pretty transparent with you all. Like I'm having a really hard week, and today has been really challenging for whatever reason. And I'm looking forward to us sharing our space today and sharing our time together. And I was kind of holding it together pretty fine. Like my TA was great, and we were changing topics, and one of the students was like, I just want to stop for a second and just like give her a shout out because she's having a bad week for whatever reason. And I just start sobbing on camera. So simultaneously most difficult and simultaneously most proud of, because whether or not I try to, I probably always come off like I have everything together. Authority is equal to showing competency all the time. And any vulnerability or delegation of control is very much my choice and orchestrated by me. And that was one of the most spontaneous moments of letting go of that control. And I was met with such compassion and support. And I think it was really humanizing for everybody and humbling for myself that like, yes, like I certainly have to have things together for structure and stuff like that, but that there's when I'm open to it, there's such beautiful support on the other end.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
How cool too to have a student who disrupts the typical, I see, at least for me, I see how often we still fall into the instructor-student dynamic with discussion. And so how great for them to be able to sort of scratch the record.
Yeah. And I mean, not to play into like gender stereotypes, but it was a dude. So I was not expecting that. And it was just so touching, and like to have the bravery, I think, to even surface that of an authority figure when you could have easily glossed over it, I think was such a powerful moment.
Thanks for sharing that. Anyone else want to share a moment that they're proud of? Maybe it is like Jessica, the same moment that they're proud of and was most difficult for them. I think there's something special that when they're tied up together like that, right?
I had a funny moment I'll share from a parenting perspective for any parents on the call doing school at home. I walked into my 6th grader's school office-ish space one day, and he was typing on the computer, and I asked what he was doing, and I looked over his shoulder. It was a Monday, and he was typing, "Dear Mrs. Whoever, I'm sorry that I didn't get the assignment done that was due on Monday because last night someone in my family got very sick and was taken to the hospital, and we had to be with that person, and like none of this had ever happened." And I was like, what is happening? What are you doing? Like alarms are going off all over the place. And I'm like at the end of my rope with online school. And he goes, oh, he pulls up a slide. He goes, oh, it's for writing class. They're teaching us how to communicate with our teachers. And this was one of the examples that we could choose to write an email. And I was like, oh. So one of my lessons that I'm trying to work into my 6-word story is trust my children. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that makes me laugh.
I was dying.
I was going to say, I think like after going through the spring and going to our remote environment for the last like 6 weeks, I struggled a lot in my class to like maintain community in that remote environment. So coming into this semester, I was really worried about, especially like students who hadn't been in a classroom together, building that community. And I think for me, like I just kind of stepped away from the traditional content in some ways. Like we had the main content, but we spent time doing small group discussions at the beginning of every class. And in like early March when the election was happening, I kind of gave my students the option of like, oh, do you want to cancel class that week? What do you want to do? And a lot of them kind of commented that like, no, we like this. This is community. This is a space we like to be in. And I think that was a really proud moment of having struggled with community in the virtual environment previously. It was really powerful to see that we had kind of successfully created it in our space this semester. So.
Awesome. That's awesome. That makes me think a little bit about what Jessica said too, in terms of being able to give up or give over some of that shared power and being able to make the decision as the community. I always think it's one thing to say that. And as somebody who's really type A, I notice how often I speak that and yet I don't act in that way for fear of giving up control or perceived control in a way that's not healthy. So I need to take a note from your book, Erin.
That building community, it's still important. It just looks different, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go ahead. If Abby, you tell me here how I'm doing on time. I'm going to try to be good about this. Some of you on this call know that time management in any sort of lesson planning is not my forte. So I'm going to move on for the sake of time. In terms of where did I miss the mark and when was I wrong, or what did I learn about myself? Let's go to those two. If either one of those jump out to you, let us know.
It's a good reflection questions.
And feel free to, if you'd like to type in the chat, you're welcome to do that too.
I think that question about when was I wrong, it's such a hard question to answer. I think that vulnerability that's tied up in being able to say that I was really wrong about that, but that it's so important, I think, in our own reflection to be able to say like, I screwed up there. I missed that part. I didn't do that right, and be able to learn from that then. Like, what does that tell you about yourself? I think that's so important.
Yeah.
As I'm saying that, I'm even struggling to admit to those things, what those things were for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I noticed for myself in that same vein, Abby, that I noticed this semester in particular, I think in an effort to try to maintain some sense of organization or control in what felt like a personal and a professional life that was really out of control. I found myself really grasping at straws and trying to keep order and keep structure in ways that weren't actually necessary or even helpful. Yeah. And so I noticed I had a real moment of this happen probably in the middle of the semester, maybe late October, where I had a few students in particular who missed class and who didn't inform me in advance. And I think typically in those kinds of settings, my approach in a normal semester is to say, are you okay? Let's start by talking about making sure you're fine before we dive into anything. Mm-hmm. And I had this I looked back on an email as soon as I hit send and had this real air of not assuming good intent of students missing class, mm-hmm. Which felt really ironic given the fact that we're in the middle of a global pandemic. Like, what else do we need to be sure to assume good intent and assume that there could be something that has to do with health? And so that was an example I saw I was wrong multiple times this semester in terms of not leading with good intent and not modeling that for my students and trying to maintain a sense of you need to be here and this is the policy and this is what your attendance looks like and so help me if you just didn't want to log on. Right. Nothing about that's warm and inviting or creating the kind of spirit I want to be teaching in. So that was something that stuck out to me where I missed the mark multiple times.
Yeah. Sometimes we have to learn a lesson a couple times before it sticks, right? I know Chris and I were talking before the session started about reading life. And I really love to read. It's such a good escape for me, both fiction and nonfiction, and both to read something and to escape from learning something. And I learned about myself that during, like, in a really stressful time of the semester, I couldn't make time to read, and I would beat myself up over it. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're giving up something that is so critical to you and so important to you. And I was not comfortable with that. And then realizing that it's just that my psyche, my mental space could not make the time and focus for it right now. And since that time has passed, that stressful time, I've been able to like totally soak up my reading life again and get back to what I know and like about myself. And so I think that it's just what we learn about ourselves and how we give ourselves grace in those times to be okay with what we can't do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I like these comments in the chat too, as I'm reading those and thinking about taking cues from the room. Jessica, I really appreciate that too. And just being able to think about what that silence can mean in a Zoom, that doesn't necessarily mean that people are checked out and not engaging with you, but it means that their interaction just looks different, right? That we got to give people a little bit more time to respond, perhaps.
It was so funny because I was having a verbal feedback session with one of my project groups, and they were like, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, you don't even know what it's like out there. Sometimes when you're frustrated with us or you think that we should be taking over more or whatever, I'm just thinking to myself, wow, this is my most lively performance of my day. Because it's true, like for them, like it's the only time they even have their camera on. So I really had to depersonalize self-enroll so that I didn't drive myself and my therapist crazy.
Yeah.
I'm reading Deshawn's comment too. Yeah. What is fulfilling to you in your role?
Mm-hmm.
How it makes you think about making mistakes too. Yeah. That's an important reflection and a hard reflection, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to keep us moving along through?
Yeah, let's, you know what, if we can, we'll go ahead and move on to, if you can look at your timeline, I'm curious in terms of what your students taught you. I know this can look like a lot of different things, but I'd love it if we could try to get as many of this one in the chat as possible, because I think sometimes how many people do we have here? 21 of us. And I know collectively we're working with a lot of wonderful students whose insight often teaches us too. So if you can think of one thing your students taught you and you look back at your timeline or think about any of the moments you have written down, go ahead and type that in the chat. And while you're doing so, I can share that the thing that I really feel like two students in particular, but two of my courses in general have taught me this semester. I had a student who referenced something about the end of the term and was saying, here are the moments that stuck out to me. These were the moments of impact that I noticed. We do a whole series in the leadership training program that I facilitate about the power of moments from Chip and Dan Heath, and how moments of insight are often ones that we remember vividly. And the student said, there were two moments that stuck out to me in this class, and referenced two moments that had nothing to do with the outcome of that particular session. And it made me think about this idea that no one remembers anything if it's not built around genuine connection and storytelling. I'll never forget, I had a professor in grad school, Dr. Barb Licklider, and I'll never forget in her college teaching course on Saturday mornings from 8 to noon, she used to say, what we know about the human brain and about the way we retain information is that if it is tied to narrative, we are so much more likely to remember it. And so I just continue to think about, where am I asking for it, and being able to pull out student stories in a way that feels like they're going to be received safely. And often for myself, I think, I spent so much of my graduate program and my early career thinking it can't be about me, it has to be about my students. And that's great to a point, but I think they taught me this semester that unless I'm willing to be able to give some of me, to be able to model what it looks like to share some of those stories, that I'm doing a disservice to them by keeping myself fully out of it. But anything else your students have taught you? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, Katie, I love that. In the mess, the magic will happen.
We want so quickly to get out of that mess so quickly, right? Like we want to tidy up the mess, but sometimes that's when those good things happen. That's really good.
If people are still typing, feel free and we can jump back and forth, but I'm curious too. Oh yeah, here are a couple more. Let's see. Prioritizing relationships. Yeah.
Make the people important, right? That's like what you were saying, I feel like, in sharing that connection.
Oh, Sarah, I love that.
Yep.
The where those messages came from part really sticks out to me.
Yeah. Take control of the narrative. That's really helpful. I like that, Sarah. Very good. You know, at LeaderShape, we talk so much about how we're all teachers and learners. And so it's so nice to see how as leadership educators, we're learning these lessons from students as well. I really like reading those. That's so good. Okay.
All right. Well, we can move on to these last two questions. These are two of my favorites. And I'll tell you that this question here, which aspects of my work were most essential this semester and which could be edited, scaled back, or left behind completely? I'm curious to get people's perspective on this one in particular.
As I'm reading that question, Kristin, and listening to you, I was thinking about my need to make things perfect was definitely scaled back, right? Like the pressure of perfect it's too much. And in this time right now where the ways in which we're looking at time is both fast and slow, right? If we can take something that's really good and be able to share it and not be so worried and tied up about what perfection looks like before we're able to share something.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, at least trying to scale those things back. It's not easy to do.
Yeah, I think so much of that question, even for me, is tied up in my own sense of security in my role and my talent or my worth. And I think about how I not only worry about how my answer to that question might be perceived by other people, but what does it say about my expectations of students? If I say this is just straight up not important, or this might be important if we were all together and not in a global pandemic, but it does not matter this year.
Right.
I'll reference a book here once we get to the end that I reread every January to start the new year that talks about the same concept of we can say yes to anything, but we can't do it all at once. And so how do we really manage that around our work and figuring out what is most essential and getting rid of the rest?
Yeah.
Or maybe even repackaging the rest.
Yeah, I really like that.
Good for you, Jessica. Way to go. And I bet no one thought any different.
Right.
I often say to my students, I'm like, we are not in a line of work where we are cardiologists. Trying something once and deciding to change it does not mean anybody dies.
That's right. That's right. That's a really good approach.
And often I say that to myself when I'm tempted to check email in a time that I know is not a good boundary for myself. I'm not paid enough to be always on call. I am not in a medical role.
Right. It's 11:30 p.m.
Yeah. Like I'm not that essential. Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
Nice. I think of Erin, your comment makes me think about what the story they see in that of being able to say, wow, we have more ownership over some of this than we realize, to be able to switch gears. I'm trying to avoid saying the word pivot because I think that's all anybody's saying, at least on our campus this semester, is pivot this and unprecedented that. And I'm like, okay, I gotta try to come up with another way to say it. Yeah. Sarah, I like that.
Help students feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is essential, right? Like in a time where how we connect and what community feels like looks so different, that making sure that you have those connections to your students, that's really critical. That's so good.
Let's go ahead and move on to that last question here. What insights have you gained? And as you think about this in terms of more long-term, what insights have you gained that will permanently impact or inform your work moving forward? I can tell you that what this one sounds so silly, but as somebody who I work in really a unit that has 6 other staff members who are all working in their own independent student facing roles.
Mhm.
So while I work on a team of 6 in terms of support or administrative tasks or support, I really don't have any. And I cannot tell you how many Monday mornings last spring semester before the pandemic began that I would be at the printer printing copies of everything that was needed for that class and everything that was needed for this particular lesson plan. And I finally decided, oh my gosh, what would it take for me to have all of that done at the beginning of the semester and to go ahead and do all of the printing at once, bind it, and give every student every handout, every accessible copy, every digital copy they need right in one folder at the very beginning. And that is something that is so small, but is so tangible. I will keep with me as we move on to future semesters where we're back on campus. But really just to figuring out how do I streamline supply delivery so that my time isn't being eaten up by something that I'm happy to do, but
Yeah.
that isn't benefiting our community.
Yeah, that's good. It's good to be able to take a look at those things, those processes, right? I like that. Well, good.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else have other insights, things that are permanently changing for you or your work?
I think the value in these reflection questions is that there's so much self-reflection in it. I imagine I'm like, I need to think about that. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, this is really good. I see
Mm.
Austin's response here. I think that Austin, what you're sharing too, I think about how your students were interested in how you were, like, what a community that you've created then, that there's this check-in loop, it sounds like, between you and the students. I think that's really good. Opens up that vulnerability. Brene Brown would be so proud, right?
Yeah.
That's
And
great.
Austin's comment, and Abby, yours as well, make me think of something. This is just coming to mind right now, so I'll flesh this out and decide if it's something that might be helpful. But knowing that a lot of us are still obviously going to be remote through the spring semester, I'm thinking about this list of questions that I'm reflecting on myself, but I think how neat it might be, whether it be in a staff meeting or whether it be with students, to have you and your students record your answers to these questions in a video format, and then to have them all, pulled together either quickly in iMovie or in whatever software you find to be helpful. I think it might be a neat way to be able to document and then look back on how people are describing some of their answers to these questions, or being able to get a general pulse of how your unit is feeling, or how your immediate team might be feeling, or how your immediate student employees might be feeling, without them having to write out a bunch of answers that they feel like turn into an essay.
Yeah, I like that, Kristin. I think it creates some accountability and some helpful vulnerability too with those folks too, just in asking them to respond and be reflective. I like that. Good. All right. Should we move on to your
Yeah,
sites?
totally. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to just preview something for you really quick. I have 5 points that are certainly not exhaustive and not at all, what do I want to say? Some of them may or may not resonate with you, but when I get to the end of these 5, I'd love to open it up for our last few minutes to find out what is one thing that is helping you either in your personal or professional life to be a better version of yourself for the people that you love and for the people that you serve in your role. So these are a few things. Before we get to that, I just want you to know that's where I'm going in a minute. But these were some things I thought of when I was first talking with Abby and the LeaderShape team. These were the things that came up when I took a look back through my lesson plans, the sticky notes I have all over my kitchen island, and through some of the journaling that I did at the beginning and middle of the semester. So the first is to validate for yourself and your students that this fall was difficult without fixing or silver lining or comparing. I have a mother who is a counselor for a living, so this is constantly something that was beat into my head growing up as a kid, was this idea that you cannot move forward and move on until you've validated what you're hurting from, what you're grieving, or what you've lost. And so I think it's really important to do this. I also think that once we have validated that this is hard, that this sucks, that there are so many pieces of it that are difficult to describe and difficult for other people to understand, I think one of the other key things I've seen this semester is that giving ourselves permission to know that none of being virtual needs to be a 10 out of 10. Or to owning up to the fact that it's okay that it can never look like it will in person, and then to use whatever you can to make that experience the best it can possibly be. None of that's new or rocket science to anybody, I realize, but I just keep thinking in my brain, I think I keep trying to make this as good as it was. And what if I reshifted my focus to say, yes, this is hard. And also, what benefits does it provide me that I can try? What things can I risk? And can I try out here that would have a much bigger ramification in person? Or what can I just try out that I might decide to change long-term permanently?
I like that.
The second is something that I reference with my students a lot, this idea that reflection is only as powerful as our ability to document and apply the insight that it provides. I keep telling my students this semester should be full of stories that you could use in an interview someday to answer the question, tell me about a time when things didn't go as planned and what you did to adjust.
Mhm.
And as much as I'm saying it to them, I'm saying it to myself. I think right now that some of these stories feel so so easy to recall, and that recollection starts to go away if we don't document the learning that we're gaining now. And that doing so helps us to avoid having to relearn the same lessons next semester and the fall of 2021 and the spring of 2022, et cetera. Number 3 is just an idea that I had that I'm looking at with my team, which is to take 10 minutes to consider how your spring semester can be better informed and approached from the insight that you gained this fall. Own what didn't work and celebrate what did. I think that that's something that can be 10 minutes to me feels tangible and not like I'm having to sit down for a private yoga retreat. Filter that time in and out for however much you need, but to really think about, okay, how do I make sure that I don't have to relearn the same lessons by documenting my reflection and actually thinking about how it informs my practice in the spring.
That's really good. Oops, sorry.
Well, that's all right. Okay, number 4, consider the following 2 questions. What risks does this ambiguity allow me to take in my teaching or facilitation methods? And what stories can I use from this fall to illustrate a concept or idea to students in the future? I'll tell you one thing, and I know that many of you may have been on the call earlier this week to talk about virtual teaching methods, but one thing that's worked really well for me, I spent a lot of time with students talking about their self-awareness in the space they take up in the room. And for many of my extroverted students that are first to jump in and first to speak up, learning how to use their voice to invite others to the conversation. And for those that typically shy away or stay toward the sideline, how they can feel both safe and empowered to be able to speak up. And so one of the things I've done that's worked really well for me that I want to continue trying is the risk of saying, you have 10 minutes for this discussion. I'm going to turn off my camera and my mic so that it's just you. And not only does it give students the space to avoid the teacher-student back and forth, but it also creates a totally different spirit in the room, even virtually, for me to be able to write notes, tally up who's talking, describe what I'm seeing in the room without being a distraction to them. So that's something for me that I've risked and I'm going to continue to try. But I also think about the idea of what stories can I use from the fall, even in my personal life, to illustrate ideas around ambiguity and risk-taking and thinking about what does it mean to actively try on and be able to engage with different perspectives without endorsing them? And how am I seeing that in my personal and professional life in ways I can tell students in a short snippet even? And then finally, number 5 is to remember we model and invite connection when we share our humanity through our stories. When we shift and reallocate power, we shift and reallocate power to our students when we do this effectively. I've seen that a lot. Again, I referenced at the beginning of this session that I had to tell a lot of my students right away, hey, I'm not going to be responding to emails this very first week of the term. Here's what's going on. Not as a means of wanting to receive sorrow or to receive pity, but to say, hey, I'm a full, whole human too, and my dad's gone, and I'm really having a hard time with that. And to feel like that can give them permission to know that we are not, that we share our humanity with our students, and that can be a gift we give to them every day. Okay, there are 3 minutes left. I know many of you might be laughing because I'm horrible at staying on time, but Abby, I'm gonna do it. So here's what I'd love to do is I'm curious if you can type in the chat anything that's been helpful for you this semester. I have 2 things I want to share with you that have been instrumental for me. The first is something I mentioned to you. It's a book called Essentialism by Greg McEwen. This book has so much insight into being able to answer that reflection question of what can I do more of? What can be completely eliminated, scaled back, or left behind? This book talks about how do we do less and do it better in our work and in our profession, but also in our personal lives. For any of you who want to talk about boundary setting or thinking about the ways that you can invest as much time and energy into what brings you joy and the pieces of your work in leadership education that you love, this book is one of the most empowering resources I've found. And again, I read it every January because I find it to be so helpful. So that's one for me. The second is going to be so silly that I'm almost embarrassed to tell you, but there's a daily notepad on Amazon for $10 by a company called Two Tumbleweeds. And it's a daily pad. What I use it for is to try to get myself out of the rut of using my email inbox as my to-do list and getting overwhelmed by tasks that I know I need to break down into smaller pieces. So I have one system for my email and I have one system for my task management. Everything I remember to do in my professional personal life goes in my Todoist app. Everything that I have committed to on a meeting scale or for any virtual hangouts with friends and family goes in my calendar. And the night before I shut down my laptop for the day, one of my closing rituals is to fill out the plan for the next day on this notepad so that I'm not starting my day overwhelmed with systems and getting distracted by them online. I only reference a paper and pen on what needs to get done today. And I'm amazed at how much that's changed my outlook and being able to say, only these 3 things matter before 5 o'clock, or these 6 things matter before 5. And as elementary as that sounds, I'm amazed at how much that's changed some things for me this semester. So if you have other thoughts, other life hacks, anything exciting that you're loving, let me know. Oh, Austin, that's so kind. Oh my gosh, I love that. First of all, I love that you're referencing Enneagram. And I will tell you, there are 2 resources that I've used this semester, all about creating a system that works for you and being properly hydrated, as silly as that sounds,
So
to
important.
follow through on your tasks. And I'm amazed at how much those 2 things have made a difference for me.
Yeah. I think Chris and I follow pretty similar structure around the to-do list and how we manage tasks and things. And I know for me, there are moments where I feel so overwhelmed by the tasks or the email that I feel like I don't know where to start. And then I remember, oh, I know what to do. I do this every time. I use the Focus Keeper app, which is the Pomodoro method.
Yeah.
For 25 minutes. And I have a little bit of a competitive nature. And so I say to myself, how much can I get done in 25 minutes?
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So if you are a self-competitive person, that can be a really helpful way to kind of knock out some tasks or clear out your inbox or be able to see how much you can get done in that amount of time.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. And Austin, I know you're asking for the link to the notepad. I have that and actually a few other resources too. So I can either put them in the chat, or Abby, I don't know if you prefer that I send them over.
That's totally fine. You can share them with me and then we can send them out to people.
Okay.
I know a couple other people have messaged me in the chat to say, can we get the questions or the recording? And we will send the recording from today's session out to people, so I can include those links as well. And Jessica's already sent that link to us, so that's awesome.
And I will say, I do have to give a shout out because Jessica Chung and some of her resources around how to be able to map out and plan out curriculum and task management are some of the very best I've ever seen. So I certainly, hats off to her, because she's the first person who got me interested in this idea in the first place.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. I know we are 1 minute over our time, but I feel like everyone is still kind of like itchy and hungry for more of that information. And I so appreciate a good conversation of idea sharing and crowdsourcing. That's so wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us and for being so engaged in these ways that are both quiet and self-reflective, and also sharing with the group as we're responding to Kristin's great ideas about reflection as well on this super weird semester. So Kristin, thank you so much for guiding us in this conversation. I know for me personally, just being able to look at that timeline over the semester to see, oh my gosh, those highs are definitely outweighing the lows, and I haven't given the semester credit for that. So thank you for this guidance that you've offered us throughout this hour. I do also just want to quickly, I know we're over our time here, but I do just want to thank you all so much for the ways in which you continue to engage in LeaderShape, and the ways in which the semester has already been weird, and that you've been connected to us, and that you sought out this series this year, or this month. We'll do this series again in January with a different set of facilitators and different topics. And in the meantime, if any of you have questions about any of our LeaderShape programs, or you want to reach out to me, you can find our contact information on the website and information about the 4 programs that we offer. We will be adding more programs, virtual programs that we offer in the spring semester as well. So if you have questions about those, please let me know. But otherwise, I hope you all have fun weekend plans, or at least weekend plans that are away from your work, that you're looking forward to over the next couple of days, to take those breaks and be hydrated and be reflective about how to finish out strong for the rest of the semester and this year. So thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. And Kristin, thank you so much for being so thoughtful in how you share your knowledge with us, and that value of that self-reflection. I think we've all learned a lot here as we've shared these ideas with each other too. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for everybody for sharing. If you have other ideas, please let us know, and we can certainly keep curating.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Awesome. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
The people who wave at the end of a we're a small but mighty group, right?
That's right. That's right.
Awesome. Thank you all so much.
I just miss you.
I miss you too, my friend. How are you? We got to catch up.
Yeah.